Hi, Flask here. We had a Steam Next Fest a few weeks ago, during which I put some game demos into my hands. So, a little late this time due to some health complications. From my hands to your eyes and ears, I cast the interesting ones at you. Connected Clue is a detective adventure game set in the 19th century, in which you play as a plucky private detective going about her work, but I think there will be a larger mystery afoot. The demo starts out with her being caught up in a bank robbery, and you have to foil it by puzzle solving around. It's standard stuff, using items on things, so I thought that's what the game would be, but it expands from there, both in gameplay and scope. It actually has a slew of mechanics related to investigation and deduction. Not as robust as some of the most ambitious detective games out there, but it did fit in with the likes of Detective Layton, Phoenix Wright, Danganronpa. There's also an entire town map that you have to physically walk across to get to different locations, once you determine where to go next. It's more than I thought it would be. Maybe my expectations were limited by the MapleStory-esque art style. Okay, it's better than that. But I'll admit that the game has a sense of style that's, again, more cohesive than it may appear. It's nostalgic in its mishmash of texture and image resolutions, seemingly emulating the Nintendo DS era. With solid writing so far and a very accessible flow, I could definitely see myself playing the game. Dungeons of Dusk is a turn-based dungeon crawler based on the 2018 first-person boomer shooter, DUSK, which is of course one of the big-time old-school shooters of the decade. Very fun game. But this is a hard turn to something way out in left field, while retaining the trappings of Dusk, similarly to 2021's Dusk 82, which was an even more retro puzzle shooter. This one seems to be capitalizing on those trappings and the setting to sell a different formula. And I mean that in terms of selling the game and selling the immersion to you as the player. But this one is also inspired by similar turn-based crawlers for Doom and Wolfenstein, which I had not been aware of before looking into this game, so it's an established pairing, surprisingly to me. Personally, I have a problem with dungeon crawlers, which is their first-person perspective combined with the limited turn-based movement is really taxing on me for some reason. Like somehow it makes me nauseous, but that's just me. The actual conceit of the genre I find enticing. There's a certain kind of primal satisfaction to scraping through a dungeon square by square, tactically maneuvering through enemy encounters and hunting for loot and secrets, using your limited resources to the best effect you can, while leveling your skills towards your playstyle. This game has all of that, and the machine feels good to get working. You enter a flow state of killing and crawling. I only played the first 2 levels, which are both in a sewer. Not the best first impression for my tastes, but it is suitably gooey and filthy for the Dusk setting. I played on normal difficulty, and thankfully it didn't feel overly challenging as I worried it might. It felt quite well balanced, actually. So even as a guy who doesn't really play this genre, I can say that it feels like a fine example of it. If you're a crawler, or you're a Dusk fanatic, this is for you. Barkour is a third-person, or third canine, stealth action platformer. You play as a secret agent dog, who's part of a spy organization, a dog spy organization, trying to take down an evil society of cat lovers, I think. You're infiltrating enemy strongholds, doing a little Metal Gear Solid stealthing around guard patrols and cameras, taking enemies out and dragging their bodies away. It's simple in execution, but it works. You can also go loud, accidentally or otherwise, and then it turns into manic shooting and biting and jumping as you take out a group of alerted guards. That's also fun. You get a bunch of gadgets that can aid either the stealthy or noisy side of things. The game does have an emphasis on platforming, so there's plenty of that. And it seems like every area will have little secrets and puzzles that net you extra points or money, whatever this collectible currency is. There were a lot of these secrets. I was impressed. Makes it feel worthwhile to explore every nook. I imagine also that if the title is anything to go by, there will be more sections dedicated to parkour challenges, where you're chaining jumps, glides, wall runs. I saw some grappling in the promotion. That's just speculation on my part, though. The tone is cartoony, with full voice acting. Doesn't take itself very seriously. It's not polished to the nines. It's smooth to play, but a little stiff. But I enjoyed it, and would most likely play it sometime. Cursed Words is a word scramble, boggle-like roguelike, with a synergy and combo focus similar to Balatro. You're trying to find the pointiest possible word in a grid of letters. The tiles have value, like Scrabble, and they can have modifiers. You purchase upgrades in the form of stickers and stamps that change point value accumulation and tile distribution in various ways. You might call it Balatro with words, but the key difference in my experience was the pacing. Balatro moves much faster. Here you're really taking your time to figure out the best possible word combo. You have to account not only for the points of the word itself, but the nature of the tiles and how they and the letters interact with your modifier upgrades. So you can sit there for quite a while puzzling it out, and so far there's no penalty for doing so. I don't mind it in the demo, but I could see getting tired because you're not feeling that adrenaline rush that you get in a faster-paced roguelike strategy game. You get a few rounds where you're just trying to reach a point total, and then you face a boss with a high point total and a debuff of some kind for you. I'm more of a wordsman than I am a numbers man, so it was fun for me in the time I played, and I'm sure, like its contemporaries, it has a lot to offer under the surface and in iterations of the challenge. It also always takes a bit to work out how to exploit these systems. EONA is a puzzle platformer that's in 3D, but perspective-wise it switches between 3D or 2.5D, depending on the section. The game sees you playing as a girl who, according to the description, is sneaking into an evil fairy queen's castle to save her mother. No hint of that in-game, as there's no text or dialogue, but that lack might be a feature. So as the girl, you're running, jumping, and clambering over furniture and other stuff, but the mistress of the castle curses your soul and puts it in a puppet, of which she has a whole army to serve and guard her. You have to do the same sorts of things as the puppet, who also has a grapple hook. Eventually you return to your body, and now you have the ability to swap the souls of the puppets. I'd wager that you'll be using that and also switching back and forth between girl and puppet to get through the castle and solve puzzles that require either. The demo does end right there, though. My first impression was a little frustrating due to a resolution issue and a buggy main menu, but the game itself, while not the smoothest platforming experience around, is solid so far. There's a slight sludginess to the feeling of movement, action, and animation, which is endemic to indie platformers, unfortunately. The production value is actually pretty high for one, though. It looks nice, especially the thoughtful lighting. It seems like it'll seek to make interesting platforming courses that weave through odd bits of the castle, and that it'll attempt to introduce fresh mechanics and little puzzle ideas. So this could be a fine entry to the genre. CALX is a third-person action-adventure game in the vein of something like Fury or Nier or Risk of Rain 2. It gives you that combination of melee and ranged combat against enemies who also have those varieties, and their ranged attacks are either homing or bullet hell patterns. Mostly the bosses have those bullet hell spreads. You initially play as a souped-up warrior, which gives you a taste of what the game's skill upgrades might feel like before it shunts you over to the Seeker, who will be the main playable character, it seems. You're some kind of being, maybe a construct, on a strange world that has seen Magitech warfare in its past. You're traversing ruins, scanning things to learn about them, defeating enemies along the way that have been corrupted by the warp, whatever that is. Emphasis on platforming while traveling, and you do miss the warrior's mid-air dash after getting a taste of it, but thankfully that's the first skill you unlock at demo's end. Feels pretty good to play. There are a few minor quibbles, like the way you home even when not locked on, the reliance on shooting rapidly, which will give your trigger finger a workout, the fact that your heavy attack doesn't feel too effective and gets interrupted pretty easily. But on the other hand, you have things like perfect dodges freezing the enemy, shooting out weak points, and I'm sure there will be a lot more chaining once you acquire more skills. There are mechanics, and the boss fights are made extra fun by the aforementioned bullet hell avoidance, so for its minor frustrations, the combat overall felt enjoyable. But I enjoyed the traversal and exploration even more, with these vast landscapes and vistas. The first thing you notice is that it has that almost cel-shaded style, like Sable and some other games. Sometimes it can look a little flat, but sometimes it can look downright inspired and awesome. And the scale of the environments is really something. As long as the systems and progression are satisfying, and the combat doesn't get too repetitive, this could be a quality experience. The Big Hollow 1982 is a point-and-click detective game where you play as an FBI behavioral science analyst who is brought onto a case that may involve a serial murderer. The title makes it sound like this might be a prequel to another game, but no, it's just set in 1982, closer to the genesis of behavioral science in criminal investigation. The demo involves a guided introduction to the case from the protagonist's superior, but the indication is that you'll be let off the leash more just after the prologue segment. Still, it does a good job of organically course-correcting your thinking and conclusions without outright giving you a "no, you're wrong, try again." I'd actually hope that the game keeps up that level of subtlety in its mechanics. You're examining photos, listing clues, and then drawing conclusions from those clues, with a focus on criminal behavior, of course. Your task in the demo is to determine if two murders are even related. It's not doing anything novel, but it's doing this well, and there were absolutely no hang-ups about the technical side of things. I was worried too that the 2D art would be a little rudimentary, but in-game it looks very nice and it's well animated. You also don't get full voice acting, but relevant generic voice lines that fire off sometimes, which is always a cute way of doing it. There were a couple of conclusions that I got wrong, so to speak, that felt like a very minor leap in logic, but it was far from egregious, and as I said, the game does a great job of corrections so far. I almost didn't want to mention it because they were so minor and subjective, but I just want to plant that flag now in case it gets any more flagrantly leapy in the full game. And I will pick up the full game. This was very promising. The tone is also refreshingly grounded and serious, and it seems like the mystery will be presented in a more involved way than just looking at photos in an office might lead you to believe. Gloomveil is a top-down exploration adventure set in an interconnected fantasy world populated by insect folk. You can probably imagine just from that premise and from looking at the game that it takes inspiration from Tunic in its gameplay design and Hollow Knight in its insect society. But like Hollow Knight, it also feels a little Souls-like in its tone of whispered mysteries of the past and ambiguous lore, and in the way that the NPCs you encounter behave. It does also have combat, but it's honestly why I stopped playing the demo early. Not only was it a lot of the same enemy, but you'd think the roll would be your dodge roll. It's not. It doesn't proc fast enough to be a dodge. Instead, you just have to sort of awkwardly turn and walk away a couple paces when the enemy attacks, and then walk back and hit them. This is not the only game ever to do it this way, and it's possible I'm missing something, but it felt a little iffy. The setting, however, is really pleasant to be in. Like Tunic, it has that almost tilt-shift toy-like style. The forest is very warm, all the bug life skittering about. I'm sure other areas will be less inviting. I'm not fond of insects, but something like this works to feel cozy. It also has that design philosophy of organically finding your way and looping back around. I did encounter one demo-breaking bug, haha, that required a restart, but work in progress. More concerning will be the feel of the game, but the store page describes combat as optional, so maybe there's a better way to play than to slay. The focus seems to be on exploring and mentally mapping the land. Dodo Duckie is a colorful, cartoony 3D platformer. I don't have much to say about this one. It's a polished platformer collectathon, probably most patterned after the Super Mario 3D Land/World games, that side of platformers. But the main gimmick of Duckie is that you're using the power of a cap to switch back and forth between 2D and 3D views at will. This, of course, allows you to solve puzzles and traverse obstacles. You have to swap back and forth regularly. Otherwise, it's a very competent entry in the genre, with a broadly appealing aesthetic. There's also a dedicated quack button, so it really has it all. The Alighieri Circle, Dante's Bloodline, is a first-person psychological horror walking simulator. Yes, that's one of the first tags listed on the Steam page. The demo doesn't explain too much, but the game is about a man who's the latest descendant of Dante Alighieri's Bloodline. Turns out the Divine Comedy was real, it's true, and this Bloodline is tasked with acting as guardian of the barrier between Earth and Hell. Every 33 years it weakens, and you must perform a ritual to stop that, or something. Nothing too novel, but I do like the idea presented that Hell isn't a universal location, but a reflection of oneself. I'm not sure how that threatens the world exactly, but to be fair, a lot of people would go to pieces if ever forced to really confront who they are. I'm not at all averse to a good walking simulator, but I wasn't really expecting anything from this game. Yet I was pleasantly surprised that it actually has some quality production value. The environments are big, varied, and detailed. You explore the family mansion, and then take a trip to Mind Hell before the demo ends. The visual fidelity is quite nice. It has full voice acting, well performed. All of the technical, mechanical, and UI stuff feels smooth. There's no combat here, so it'll just be narrative and some puzzle solving. You also collect journal pages, as is the custom. I'm hoping this isn't just a well-crafted vertical slice, and that the full game would prove to keep up this standard. It's an Italian development studio, so I wish them the best in realizing their take on such a pivotal Italian subject. Wild Blue Skies is an arcadey on-rails shooter. It's a Star Fox, down to the squad of anthropomorphic animal fighter pilots. I don't think the setting is spacefaring. The demo takes place on an island, and the warfare seems bound to this world. I played the demo twice, because it's a short, single level. Less than 10 minutes on my first try, less than 5 on my second. You can't skip the opening lore cutscene that plays when you start the demo, for some reason. But other than that, the production quality is very high all over. From animated openings, to art style cohesion, to effects and sound, all of the elements of presentation really good. The part where I'm not so sure about it is the gameplay, which is the most critical area. Now, I'm not a Star Fox fanatic. I played my share of 64 back in the day, and we're not even counting adventures for the purposes of this comparison. So I don't remember exactly how Star Fox is supposed to feel, if there was a stiffness or a taxing effort required. But that's what I got with Wild Blue Skies. The control of the ship felt thick, which prevented twitch decisions, and the shooting felt really limp. I'd have to be hammering the shoot button like my life depended on it to kill any common enemy before smashing into them, because I have to be flying at them to hit. I really don't want to be button mashing for an entire game just to do the basic combat of its gameplay. There are bombs, but they were limited and finicky. Again, maybe this is just accurately emulating an old school style of control that I don't remember being this trying, but if so, maybe it's best I leave it in the past. Still, an A grade to everything else. Phonopolis is a point-and-click adventure set in a city where a tyrant known as the Leader gives the populace commands that compel obedience over citywide loudspeakers. You're a lowly worker named Felix who finds a pair of headphones that block out these commands, and so begins his escapade of revolution. Maybe. This game is just bursting with charm. The art style is already very distinctive and artfully crafted in its cardboard propaganda aesthetic, but the animation work is top-notch. In most scenes, there are at least some moving elements that make the place feel alive, and in the more open areas, there's some bit of animation in any given region of the screen. Citizens doing this or that, going about their lives. Little mechanical whatsits puttering along. This is from the same studio as the Samarost games and Machinarium, which I played and enjoyed years ago, so no wonder they have a handle on this. Also great is the music, which is one of those remarkable scores that's tailored to the events transpiring. So it really enhances gameplay and story beats, both emotionally and tactily. Mechanically too, very enjoyable. The demo at least has some good, solid point-and-click puzzling, but the design of it lends towards the overall chaotic and scrappy energy of the setting. By clicking around, you're basically causing trouble all over the place in an attempt to get where you need to go, and it works for the themes. The other thing I want to mention is that instead of an omniscient narrator or full voice acting, the game is narrated by Felix's inner monologue. But he also provides the voices of other characters that he speaks to, relating what they say as if in prose. It's a smart way of doing it if development resources are limited, but it also gives the story a protagonist-centric lens that seems right in this case. Like a storybook about an inadvertent anti-authoritarian rebel. Vultures, Scavengers of Death, is a turn-based tactics survival horror game, inspired by Resident Evil, naturally, set in the 90s, naturally. You are two operatives of a mercenary squad, tasked with recovering a cure from a city infested by infected. Gameplay takes the form of grid-based tactics movement and combat, with action points and movement points. The items in inventory, the level layout with locked doors and keys, those feel survival horror, of course. You can knife or gun, reload, shove enemies, walk, run, or sneak. At first I was like, okay, I'll get the hang of this. Making sense, typical tactics techniques. Seemed like it would be more challenging than usual, because of that survival horror influence. But one or two zombies at a time, you could figure out how to deal with that encounter. Some combination of attacking with the right weapons and aiming at the right body parts, moving, pushing, it would solve the situation. It's when I got to these big rooms full of infected enemies who have movement initiative as soon as you enter, and beeline towards you right away, that I was completely lost on how to proceed. I thought at first that you might need to run through in a really specific way, where you would be just out of range, but that didn't work. Then I thought, oh, maybe I'm entering the room in walk mode, when I need to enter it in sneak mode, so I don't alert anyone. But no, even entering while in sneak, they alert immediately and head towards you. Then I thought maybe I need to immobilize certain ones to get past, by aiming for the legs. But I don't think there's any chance of using that effectively with how many foes there are in these areas. And on top of that, once you exit the area to run boldly away, if you ever re-enter, the enemies haven't reset. So every time you enter, they're closer to surrounding you. I thought maybe I needed to lure them to one side, exit, go around, and enter from another door. But that might only be doable in one of those rooms, and it didn't even work because the space isn't big enough for them not to just come at me again. So that's what ended my time with the demo. I died a few times in a big room that was necessary to cross, and decided it wasn't clicking for me. There is an action for explosives, but not only did I not find any, I don't think the infected would be bunched enough to effectively take a group of them out. Maybe I'll check out some gameplay from someone when this releases to see what strategy I'm missing. Town of Zaz is an action-adventure RPG with farming elements, clearly taking colorful cues from the 5th or 6th console generation of studios like Square, Namco, Sega, Level 5. A splendid era to pull from. And yet it also has a unique identity that really comes through. in its fantasy tech magic mishmash painted with a Mesoamerican or Latin American brush. The premise is you're a shaman boy from a farming family who has a bit of an independent streak. The demo, which I think is just the first hour of the game, sees you coming home from training in the forest with your spirit companion, fighting monsters and solving puzzles along the way. Then you explore the titular town a little. There are merchants and a few people to speak to, but I imagine it'll come more into play later if the game's named after it. You also, of course, go to your family's homestead, clearing out pests, fixing a fence with a magical barrier item, doing some farming, and getting a home-cooked meal from Mom, which boosts your stats for the day. And that gets us into the mechanics. There is apparently a day cycle in that certain things happen, occur, or renew each day. This includes the crops in your yard, naturally. The demo ends before the goals of farming are laid out at all. Out in the pest-infested wilds, you're hacking and slashing with a few different techniques, and you'll be unlocking more skills involving the spirit companion, who also helps you by locking on to foes. The combat feels good, simple yet satisfying, and with a slight curve of getting into the groove. Good pacing to areas, with puzzles and mini-bosses to keep the flow fresh. It all feels super polished. There are more details I could go into, but to keep it reined in, this is a proper studio-quality video game that feels like it could appeal to all ages and multiple genre enthusiasts. Again, I'm not sure how much the farming will be a focus. This first hour was much more about the combat and exploration, so don't go in relying on that, but it's very accessible. And oh, I didn't even mention, it has 2D animated cutscenes throughout. I always really appreciate when games invest in that, because it's instant production value in my book. Whirlight, No Time to Trip, is a point-and-click adventure game featuring an eccentric inventor and an eclectic artist. I played for a while and didn't meet the artist, but Hector the Inventor, at least, is a kooky character living in Venice Bay in 1962, and I assume there will be time shenanigans. You start in a dream sequence and then putter around his lab and the surrounding area for a bit. You'll notice it has a 2000s 3D sheen, though obviously in higher resolution. I don't know how you replicate that particular rendering look in 2026, but it hits for me. Maybe because of my nostalgia for it. But like when objects animate, it even has that same feeling of being a pre-rendered animation. Just better frame rate than that used to have. As far as adventure games go, it felt like a cross between The Longest Journey and the tone and writing of a LucasArts adventure. Could just be because the demo starts in a dream sequence that it feels like The Longest Journey a little bit. But it doesn't take itself seriously. My favorite bit is how, because the game's set in 1962, Hector keeps saying stuff like, "I feel like I'm in a new episode of The Twilight Zone," or "This is just like a piece by contemporary artist Andy Warhol." With the frequency, I have to imagine it's an intentional gag that they're doing. And the gameplay is solid, typical fare, but the kind of zany situations that you'd expect from the era it's evoking, without necessarily being moon logic most of the time. You have to have an open mind and some whimsy in your heart, perhaps. I could see this genuinely being a pretty memorable point-and-click adventure. The developer has a previous game from 2020 in the same genre. I should try that out. PAPERHEAD is a fast-paced first-person shooter set in a world of cardboard and pencil drawings where something has gone horribly awry and now everything is grisly and crazy and deadly. The levels you go through in the demo feature gruesome experiments and atrocities on the cardboard people that might make you want to throw up, but I didn't throw up. I was strong. The game generally also has a scratchy sketchpunk aesthetic, especially in its character designs and cutscenes. A little Jonan Vasquez, a little Binding of Isaac, probably other more contemporary references. The description says there will be elements of adventure horror, and aside from thematically, I really only saw the focus on the shooter gameplay in the demo. I think that's intentional. The shooting is good though. As I said, very manic, very twitchy. Swarms of enemies come at you fast, and there are several varieties which not only attack you in different ways, but need to be dealt with differently. That's what you want out of a boomer shooter. It also has not a wealth of movement options, but a lot of movement, in that you can slide and kick, and you chain those with running and jumping to cover ground and get mad air. You're also constantly kicking enemies away and leaping over them, because they really like to get in your space. You do use the air getting to do some platforming, to reach certain areas, which is fun level design. The other key mechanic is your pencil, which you whip out to throw bombs, which need to slowly replenish, and to erase enemy bodies to replenish your health. It's a good twist on the formula of absorbing health from slain enemies, because you can sort of leave yourself health packs all around the arenas. Or you get caught by some damage and have to scramble around the room, picking up health while dodging more incoming fire. I liked that mechanic. And with an industrial soundtrack, what's not to like if you like this genre? ATMOSFAR is a sci-fi survival crafting game for 1 to 4 players. I just played it alone since I didn't want to go to the effort of arranging a session with friends. But I'm kinda picky with trying out survival crafting games. They have to have a certain appeal that either pertains to my tastes or seems to be doing something relatively novel. I do like sci-fi stuff in general, but in this case it was the setting that interested me. You're on a planet that has no proper land or sea, just floating islands of rock covered in flora and fauna. You can use an aircraft to go from island to island, but while you're exploring on foot, even with a jetpack handy, you still have to be careful. Otherwise, the retrieval drone's gonna have to scoop you up and dangle you to safety. So obviously these games are usually more fun with friends, as a rule, but to me, there's a spectrum of survival crafting, with heavily multiplayer-focused games on one end, and games that have a bit of a narrative and are more focused towards the personal experience on the other end. ATMOSFAR is not on that latter end of the spectrum as much as something like Subnautica or The Long Dark, but definitely closer to that feeling than something like Valheim or Enshrouded. Maybe around the region of The Forest, where friends are encouraged because of the open-endedness, but there's definitely a narrative experience to unfurl that even pertains to the loneliness of the sole expeditioner. And that's the premise of this game, that you are an escaped convict following the trail of a venturing vagabond. You're free to explore, find resources, craft stuff if you can, find journal logs at abandoned settlements, but your goal is initially laid out for you, mostly recoveries and repairs. And then I think it gets more and more loose as the game expects you to follow your own initiative more as you aim vaguely towards the next objective. It's fun to explore too. The movement already feels pretty liberated, with good jumps, but then you get a jetpack and the world opens up even more. I could see this being a compellingly unique entry in the genre because of the setting and that movement feel. The survival crafting gameplay otherwise is fairly standard, in that you're collecting plants and rocks and setting up camps. It is cool that you can pack your camp onto your aircraft and transport it to other islands. That's something I really like. So this one could have enough to make it a standout offering. Burden Street Station is a surreal adventure game that's hard to describe because it's one of those fairly avant-garde experiences that wields mechanical conventions to unconventional ends. First of all, thank you for the good main menu music. In my opinion, the music on the first menu should make you want to chill out and listen till it loops. And this one does that for me. And it's just a cool, funky-looking menu screen that gets you curious about what this art style even is. Beyond that, though, the music is good throughout the demo. Several tracks that caught my ear in different scenes. Anyway, the game is, you're a librarian in a repository for life moments taken from people across the cosmos, or wherever we are. Your job is to shelve books where they belong, based on those moments, but one book doesn't have a moment. So you and this talking book are sent off by the head honcho to the world of Burden Street Station, because its god has disappeared, and it no longer has any moments being generated. Then you take a train ride and head on over. As you go, you discover that you have the ability to retrieve moments from people's minds by eliciting certain emotions through conversation. This takes the form of dialogue options of different character or personality, one or more of which is deemed correct and allows progress. You gain new response types by reaching the dialogue endpoint and entering the moment, which is a little first-person scene with some vagaries. You meet all sorts of wacky and wonderful characters with various personalities and problems, some of whom you can extract moments from. Honestly, this premise sounded great, and all of the style is excellent, very creative. The core dialogue system, unfortunately, felt a little willy-nilly. I was trying to choose responses based on who I was talking to, what they might respond to, but I got it wrong more than I got it right. And your book just says, no, try a cynical response instead. Not only is the overall tone a bit too chaotic to really nail down the correct route, but the repercussions for failure feel limp. Still, there's so much about this game that just oozes personality. I could certainly see myself playing it. I'd much rather a super creative game with a somewhat noodly gameplay system than a straightforward, self-serious adventure that doesn't take risks. And the visual art on display here is totally wild, as you've been seeing. Denshattack is a train racing / tricking game, very arcadey. The idea is that the world has suffered some apocalyptic problems, and now the remnants of civilization are connected only by fragmented railways that skilled train drivers use to make deliveries and such. But there's also a semi-organized ring of train drivers who compete against each other in trick races, fast times, and style points. It's the kind of bonkers premise you want in a game with this energy. Firstly, another example of a banger main menu song that makes you want to hang around and sear the yellow into your retinas. The in-game music definitely keeps your blood pumping too. But yeah, the gameplay is a mixture of an arcade racer and an extreme sports game, with an emphasis on tricks to earn points. It's super fast-paced, maybe a little too fast-paced for these aging synapses of mine, but I'm sure I'd get better at it with practice. The courses are wild and winding, weaving through city ruins, monuments, and natural formations. It's so fast that you'll often be on a delay of a few seconds in appreciating the set piece you just did flips over. The environments are really awesome and colorful. I found that I kept hitting inputs that would kill myself, but again, I think that just takes practice. And the penalty is just being reset a few seconds, which only impacts your score. When you get in the groove, it feels real nice. Not only are you aiming for the best score through speed and tricks, there are also a set of optional challenges you can complete on each stage. These range from doing several perfect drifts to scaring some bats in a cave section. And the sense of style throughout is very well realized. If you like anything like Jet Set Radio, Pro Skater, or Endless Runner games, this could appeal to you for sure. Gunboat God is a 2D side-scrolling shoot-'em-up, level-based, where you're a guy in a gunboat teaming up with a crocodile mechanic to blast hordes of incoming monsters with a variety of weapons. You've fallen from the citadel and you gotta get back, destroying anything in your way. It's a lot of fun. Absolutely something I could see coming out of the Newgrounds or Xbox Live Arcade eras. It has that simple concept predicated on skillful gameplay, where you have a plethora of options at your disposal. The weapons are nicely varied, and I found that you really should be equipping certain ones for certain situations, which I like. You're speeding along a 2D plane of water, but you can jump or dive, which you'll be needing to do to get over or under obstacles. and to dodge bursts of enemies. The cool conceit of that is, as you kill enemies, you build up energy, which actually makes your bullets faster and more numerous, and lets you jump or dive further. So you go from puttering along, plinking away, to zipping all over the screen, spraying a bullet hell at your enemies. So doing well rewards you in a very viscerally satisfying way. The other very satisfying element is the sound quality of your weapons, the boom. A game like this could have just had paltry zaps, but the chews and thumps of your cannon get into your skull. The visuals are also quite nice, bold and well animated, and that black or white silhouette on color relief just keeps everything very identifiable. Apparently there will be over 200 missions, and some other modes. I could very much feel this game having that, as the description puts it, just one more go addictiveness, though your hands might suffer for it. It took me a while to play all the games that looked appealing this time, and there were a lot, so thanks for sticking with me till now. See you next Fest.